if I don't work in what I studied, so what do I work in? So I like the idea of, like I mentioned, in consulting, there's so many different fields, so many different tracks, and it's a very unique opportunity to try a lot of things in a lot of different places that usually you wouldn't get your foot in the door as a fresh graduate. So that's why I thought, why don't I learn more about myself? I learn more about what I like, what I hate, by working in consulting. And then later on, it would be easier for me to specialize once I actually know and I've tried, in person. Because research can only get you so far in terms of working. You really have to try it for yourself to know whether you would like it. So for me, for example, what I found out is, for example, I'm really not interested in finance. I don't see myself at all in working in the banking sector or any sector related to that. So that's something that, okay, at least I crossed it off my list. I know that, for example, this is not for me. And another thing that really surprised me is, if anyone knows me, they know I'm not a sporty person. I'm not interested in sports. I don't play sports. I don't watch sports. And yet I did a project related to sports, and I was pleasantly surprised that I actually find the topic really interesting. And so that was honestly a really, really good thing to learn, that, okay, wow, there's actually something that interests me that I would never have seen coming, and I wouldn't have known unless I worked in this field. So I think that's what the first thing that drew me to consulting. Secondly is, honestly, I get bored of routine. And the thing about consulting is there's no routine. You can build a bit of a routine on a specific project if you stay on the project for a long time. But usually day to day, the tasks change. And of course, the projects change. You go from project to project. And so if you're a person who, the idea of having a routine where you wake up and you know what your day is going to be like, and you know what tasks you're going to do and what work you have and who the people are that you're going to meet, if that idea scares you, then this is, I would say, a good field for you. And then after that, I would say career progression. So in terms of consulting, the work is a lot, the hours are a lot, and the exposure is a lot. And because of that, you are treated like you are more senior when you want to leave consulting, because they already know that it's hard to get in. So you've been through a rigorous process that eliminated a lot of other people. So if you got in, they already know that you have something there. And then after that is, if you stayed for a while, you gain skills. Like, they know for a fact, like government sectors or other firms that they want to hire consultants, they know that you've learned things that they can use, and other people your age with similar years of experience in another place that isn't consulting wouldn't have the same amount of knowledge or level or skills usually. And so it makes you basically move up the career ladder faster. So let's say I work at McKinsey, a consulting firm, and then I want to work at, let's say, Aramco, for example, or Aramco wants to get me from McKinsey. What if I want to leave? They would give me let's say, specialist at Aramco, but I only have in consulting 1 or 2 years of experience. So if I were starting at Aramco as a fresh graduate, when I immediately graduated, it would have taken me at least 3-4 years to reach senior specialist. But since I spent a year or 2 or a year and a half in consulting, I can move up quickly because of the fact that I'm in consulting and the work that I do. So this is, I think, something main that I looked at, other than, like, I didn't care much about the money, the benefits. It was more the career progression. And then lastly, like I mentioned, there's no permanent scope or no permanent, we could say, boss. So a risk is that if you're unlucky enough to work in, like, let's say, find a job with a boss that you have an issue with, or you're not that interested in the department they put you in, sometimes it's really hard to switch, go to another department, find another boss, things like that. But in consulting is that if you're unlucky to have that same situation where you don't like the scope of your project or you don't like your manager, it's temporary. I have 2 more months, I have 6 more months, I have 1 more month, and then I'll have a whole new team, a whole new project, a whole new topic to work on. After that, I would say, what are the key skills needed in consulting? So the first I would say is analytical thinking. As we mentioned before, the core purpose of consulting is that someone has an issue that they can't solve and they need you to solve it. And so if that's the case, they don't need just what they would say data monkeys or someone to just research, because the client can do that. Anyone can do that. They have Google, they have ChatGPT now. So if I just wanted hard data and numbers, I can do that myself. I want you to give me what the data means. why the data says this. How can I use the data to help figure out my problem and solve my problem? And so that's a really important skill to have. And it doesn't come overnight in the beginning. It takes a while to get in consulting, which is normal. Because as a junior person without much experience, it's completely normal for you to kind of hone that skill over time. The more issues you come up with, the more you try to solve them. So I would say that's a very important skill to have, is looking at the data and getting key insights, is what they call them. Getting what the data means, not just our profits are down 50%. Okay, like we already knew that, for example. So what do we do about it, or why? So that's, I think, number one. Number two is effective communication. So I would say for us junior consultants, sometimes it's, you can say, not your main task. If you're a junior consultant, it depends on the team you're in. But unfortunately, it's not that customary usually that you're going to be the one who's presenting to the client or influencing the client. So usually that would come from like the manager or the partner. But you're going to have to definitely have good communication with your team. It's like one of the most important things. The unique thing about consulting is that when you're on a project, there's a very strict hierarchy. So it goes very strictly partner, then maybe principal or associate partner. It depends on the firm, but they're the same thing. It's the step before partner. And then manager, and then senior associate, business analyst or consultant, analyst, intern. Very strict hierarchy. And so when you're not on a project, however, you have no hierarchy. There's no one in charge of you. You don't have a boss. That's very unique. That when you're on a project and you're doing what they call proposal work, working on proposals or working on data research, if you're not staffed, is what they call being on a project. There's no one in charge of you. There's no one to tell you what to do. But if you're on a project, it's the opposite. And so you'll always have a team, and you'll always have to have really strong communication, because unfortunately you're spending more time with these people than like your own family. And so you have to be able to, sometimes there's a lot of days that are remote work, because a lot of consultants come from abroad to Saudi, like usually Dubai based. And so they usually have 2 or 1 day, usually Thursdays, where they're working remotely. And so when you're working remotely, you have to have constant communication of when's the deadline, when's the meeting, let's get on a call, I have a question, things like that. And then if you're blessed with a good team and a good client, because unfortunately sometimes clients, they don't want junior level consultants to be that involved. It's rare, but sometimes it happens. So one time I remember on my first ever project, the client didn't like that there were interns on the team and I was an intern. And so it was kind of like, we want you to be seen, not heard. And so in that case, the team can't really support you in terms of talking, presenting to the client. But if you have a normal or a good client and you have a good manager or a team that wants you to develop and learn and grow these skills, then it's a perfect opportunity that you can actually get opportunities to present. On my last project, I was fully on my own in terms of I get in the room with the client alone and I'm fully in charge of what I made, the work I did, presenting it, influencing, defending, answering questions, all of it. So it depends, but it usually is not the most typical for you to immediately present and influence the client. After that, I would say adaptability. It is so extremely important. So as we mentioned before, you keep going to new projects, new topics, new teams. If that's the case, you have to be willing to work in new industries and fast-paced environments. So this is, I would say, in my opinion, I think the hardest and the most important skill to have in consulting. It's especially as a junior, because you're not specialized, you're not an expert in any topics, and you have to constantly go from project to project. And as soon as you feel like you grasped the current topic you're working on, you go to another one and you learn from scratch. So immediately there's a different way of working, there's a different flow in each project. So for example, it's that, okay, now I have to learn about water desalination, something so technical, which is تحلية المياه. تاخذوا موية مالحة تحولوها لموية حالية. شيء ما إيش دخلني أنا ما درسته. فلو هذا that's the thing I have to do. It's like, it's a very technical topic that I have no knowledge on, and I have to immediately start learning because I have to put the information on the slides. And so I remember I met a client in this same topic, water desalination, who said a project in consulting is like a mini MBA or a mini master's degree, because you're learning about a topic so much and applying it for months, and then you just move on. And it's like you become an expert. It's like, now that I left that project, for example, I wouldn't say expert, but I know more than the average person for sure. And so I know about the specific technologies in desalination and the specific like percentages and the specific companies working in it in Saudi. And I learned so much about Saudi and water. I didn't know that Saudi was one of the biggest, strongest companies in water countries in water desalination. And so as soon as I got used to this project, I started finally getting the information after like a month into the project. I get used to even the technical side of projects. So every client has a different template for PowerPoint, different colors they use, usually related to their logo, different way of working, different language. So sometimes they want you to make slides in English, sometimes only in Arabic. You never make slides or emails or text in English ever. And so every time you have to adapt. And even if it's the same language, let's say they only work in Arabic, some clients have specific words they like to use and words they can't use or they don't want to use at all, and you have to adapt every time. So this is, I think, the most critical point or part of consulting. And then moving on, I would say time management and organization, extremely, extremely important in consulting. I know we hear that for every job, but it's really related to the amount of work in consulting. So when you have so much tasks and so much information, you are in charge of fully being organized. And so it honestly catches up to you when you don't start in a way where you know where you put these PowerPoints. You have so many different versions. You're constantly working on new versions of slides and PowerPoints with your team. And so you have to sometimes go to the client, let's say. They tell you, no, I liked how you did it earlier. Change it. You have to have the old version of the slides. And you have to know what they're talking about. And you have to know where you put it on the laptop. So I think the best consultants, especially at the managerial level, are the organized ones. The team can't run. Like I've had a manager who wasn't organized, and it really trickles down into the team and the project. So we're missing deadlines. We're working late nights. We're, حاسين مو عارفين فين الله حطنا. كل واحد يسوي شيء. It's the most important skill. After that, of course, teamwork. Like I mentioned, as a junior consultant, you'll never be alone. You'll always have a team on the project. And so you have to adapt to fully working with the team and communicating with them. And then lastly, I would say personality traits. So these aren't critical, as in if you don't have them naturally or right now, doesn't mean you're not going to be a consultant or you're not going to be a good one. But these are skills that I noticed are useful to being a good consultant. And most of them you can learn over time. So it's not a big deal if it's not really who you are. But first, I would say you enjoy solving complex problems. People who like a challenge, because consulting, a lot of challenges come up and there's a lot of change and the plan doesn't always go the way you want it to. So we had a plan and we started working on it, and then obstacles come up and we have to adapt. So I would say if you are willing to go with the flow, this is a really good trait in a consultant. After that, I would say comfortable with ambiguity and pressure. So kind of confusion or being lost or not knowing what to do. It's a really big part of being a consultant, especially in the beginning. And so the earlier you kind of get this trait down, the better. So me, I'm an anxious person. I'll never have no worries and no doubts, and I'll be completely comfortable with confusion. That's just not the case. But you have to be able to just move on. Like, yes, I feel, for example, stressed or pressure, but I'm willing to not let that distract me and not let that take my focus away, so I can move on and do the work I need to do. So it's a really important skill to have, and it comes with time, in my opinion. Another thing is willing to learn continuously. This is both a pro and a con. A con is, like I said, when you are unsure or when you keep having to relearn different topics every time. But at the end, when you look at it big picture, I know about so many different topics that no one else knows about, for example, unless they work in that one place. But I know about all these places. So I know a bit about sports. I know a bit about banking. I know a bit about water desalination, a bit about energy. And so it's really useful to have the skill and to know these things, but it's not actually easy when you're doing it. And so if you're willing to constantly keep learning, because it's very important, like I said, in adaptability in consulting, it makes your life so much easier. And you're the one who's going to have the knowledge and the skills to gain for the future. And then lastly, stress management. So I've seen some consultants handle stress better than others. And I'll be completely honest, it's a stressful job because of just the lack of routine and the lack of certainty, which is just normal for a human being. So when you come to a job and you know what you're going to do and you have the same tasks, you'll have less stress than someone who is the opposite. And so the way you handle it. You don't get into like bad routines. You don't have to rely on I guess bad habits. Is really important in consulting. So moving on. So if you're interested, how can you join? First step is applying, of course. So you just go to the specific company's website. And the good thing about consulting is the hard part is not the application, it's the interview. So some companies, they rely a lot on the application because they want to immediately weed out the people before the interview. But for consulting, it's the complete opposite. So the online application is extremely straightforward. It's your information and that's it, always. It's going to be, put your CV here, how many years of experience you have, what's your name, what's your ID number, that's it. Maybe sometimes they'll ask you if you're interested in a specific industry. So like, yes, I'm interested in sports and for example, healthcare. That's it. But that's the first step. It's the easiest step. After that, or not after that, technically, is the list of companies that you can apply to. So in terms of specifically Saudi Arabia, the biggest companies are BCG, Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, Bain, Kearney, Oliver Wyman, Arthur D. Little, Roland Berger, Booz Allen Hamilton, and then there are others. Why did I put others by itself? Is because there are companies that, yes, they do consulting, but they're not purely consulting companies. And including that is the Big Four. So the Big Four, which is EY, KPMG, Deloitte, and PwC, they are accounting firms who now do consulting. So I'm specifically, everything I'm mentioning is specifically about the companies from 8 and up, not the Big Four, because they operate differently in terms of, there are just a few differences. Maybe later on, if anyone is curious, I can go into them. But for now, I'll just say that they're not considered pure consulting companies. They are accounting firms who have a consulting practice on the side. And then there are specialized consulting companies that work in only one topic. So for example, there's a company called Portis. It's a consulting company only specializing in sports, only sports projects. Then there's, for example, Accenture. Usually they just do digital technology projects. So again, this depends on whether or not you have a specific field you want to be into and you want to be in consulting, then that would make more sense. Because when you get into a general consulting firms like the one I mentioned, there's no guarantee that you'll work in the field you want. So if you enter and you say, I want to work in tourism, you might not get put on a project that's on tourism, and you really can't do much about it as a new joiner and junior consultant. So those specialized firms are perfect for people who want both. And then step 2 is, let's say you're applying to these companies. How do you prepare before the interview? First, case studies. Consulting case studies are the most important factor in whether or not you get into the firm. So I think what's good about consulting is that there's no, how can I say? There's kind of no favoritism that you see in other firms. And no, it's very a fair process usually, and everyone's equal. And the only thing that differentiates whether or not you get in is simply how you do in the interview. That's it. And so the case studies are basically, like it says, case studies, little like things you solve that will be asked in the interview. So basically how it goes in consulting interviews is that they'll give you a case study, you have to solve it. And then usually before they'll ask you the normal fit consulting questions. And then after that, you can ask them questions and that's it. And usually it's a few rounds. There's never, or very rarely, one interview in a consulting company. It's usually, you can say, to enter as an intern, usually, or an analyst, usually 3 interviews. Business analyst or consultants, usually 4. Anything above that, it keeps increasing. So associates maybe 5, manager maybe 6, partner maybe 10 or 11. I remember I talked to a partner who said he had 11 or 12 interviews. So it increases the higher the position is. But for us, it's 3 to 4. That's the normal amount. It's very rarely 2 or less, and it's honestly can get to 5. I think in Bain, I did around 5 interviews. So yeah, so basically the most important thing is the case studies. And then where do you find the case studies? Case books or websites. I personally prefer case books because I think that they are more realistic to the real life interviews. And so, yeah, there are case books that are done by usually different universities that have consulting clubs, like INSEAD, Harvard, Wharton, Yale. And yeah, they publish these different things that you can practice, and they put them in terms of the industry and difficulty level and things like that. After that, another thing you can do to prepare is live interviews. So there are two websites. There's Case Coach, and honestly, I'm blanking on the other one. I forgot the name. Prep Lounge. Yeah, Prep Lounge and Case Coach. Those are two websites where you go online, you make an account, and then you get connected with someone who also is practicing for consulting. So you give them a case for 45 minutes, they solve it, like you're the interviewer, and then they do the same to you. And you can either choose you start or they start. And it really helps practicing for interviews, because no matter, in my opinion, how many case books you solve, it's not the same as a real life interview because you're on your own. There's no pressure. There's no one waiting. So I would say prioritize live interviews over the cases. In my opinion, when I started, I did like less than 10 cases by myself. And then I started case interviewing, and I did like 60 or 70 case interviews, live interviews, sorry. And that's what made the difference, in my opinion. And then another thing is you can reach out to consultants in specific companies you want to join. So when I wanted to join Kearney, I reached out to a manager at Kearney, and I asked him if he could practice with me, if he could give me an interview. And he said yes. And so he did a practice mock interview with me. And he is a manager who interviews analysts or business analysts like me. And so he knows exactly what he was looking for. And he told me straight up whether or not he would, for example, hire me, whether he would let me pass from this interview, what I could do better. And I wouldn't have gotten these really important insights unless I talked to him, because even though live interviewing is really important, but also sometimes you're interviewing with people in the same position as you. We're all young, we're not managers, we didn't work in consulting before, some of us. So you can't really give me insights in terms of what the company's looking for, but you can give me insights in general in terms of whether I did a good interview or not. So I think this is also something important that you could do. Lastly, like I said, practice, practice, practice. Case studies have to be practiced, and it makes a big difference. People can tell whether or not you have put in the work and you know how to solve cases or not. And the more cases you have in your registry in your mind, the more you're more likely to get a case in an interview that you already know. Like, it has happened to me. I've practiced a case and then I got the same one in the interview. Just then they changed the name of the firm, for example. And so I did really good on it because I've already practiced it. So I think this is the most important thing. And then, of course, you want to research what firms you're looking for. What are the different tracks? So some firms, they offer from the beginning that you can be specialized in a track. Like, for example, digital track, usually you can be specialized in it from the beginning. And then there are different tracks in some companies. Like, I'll mention specifically in McKinsey, there's what they call the research hub or the hub. This is like, it allows you to kind of work as a general researcher, and sometimes you do projects, unlike when you're a consultant where you're supposed to be on a project always. So in this way, you can then specialize earlier than if you were a general consultant, which you specialize way later on, like almost if you're a manager level. So you can get specialized, and this depends on what you want. Usually it's a bit lower in pay, but it's also chiller in terms of work and hours. So since you're not always on a project, you're not always working late nights and things like that. So research on what works for you. Networking, add consultants on LinkedIn in different companies, reach out to them, ask for advice, ask them to interview and do cases with you. It's really important. And also you can ask for referrals. So a referral is like usually a system all consulting companies have, where they just put your CV and your information on the website. And then all it does is, it doesn't guarantee that you get in, of course, but it just puts your name at the top of the list of people to interview. So it puts you atop the people who don't have a referral. So they reach out to you quicker. It depends on if you want to be reached out to quicker, if you already finished your practicing and you feel like you're good, or if you want more time to practice, then don't get a referral. And then lastly, assessments. So when you apply to consulting firms, usually the step before the interview is the assessment. And it depends on each company how the assessment goes. Each one has a unique one that they made. But for example, McKinsey's is pretty famous. It's like a video game. So like it tests, I guess, if you can follow instructions, your time management, how your thinking is, a bit of your math level. BCG was like pure math. It wasn't a video game. It was like specific questions and answers, doing a lot of math and looking at charts and graphs and things. So this is also something that it's a good to know about the assessment before you start it, just so people have different tips and tricks. Your friends or whoever, people you've known who have interviewed, can help you out. And then lastly, when it comes to the interview, so these are all things you should ask about. So the consulting format itself. So this is, you'll learn it as you practice, so you don't have to ask about it. But what I mean is that the interviews in consulting for all firms, they go a specific way, the way you have to communicate. So the first step is they're going to give you the case prompt, you write it down. And then, for example, you say, okay, thank you for the case prompt. Now I would like to repeat it just to make sure I got everything. And then you just repeat what they said. Like, this is a specific format that you wouldn't know unless you had experience in doing consulting interviews and case books. So this is what I mean by consulting format. You have to know it before you start interviewing. The second thing is the company's interview style. So there are two styles that companies can choose from: interviewer-led and candidate-led. If it's interviewer-led, it means that the interviewer is the one leading the case from the beginning. So they say, okay, thank you. I would like for you to answer this question. This is the case, blah, blah, blah. You kind of take a back seat and you follow what they say. However, other companies, it's called candidate-led. You're in charge of leading the interview. So you say, okay, thank you. First, I would like to look into this. I would like to ask you that. So lastly, I was saying the company's interviewing style. So yeah, like I mentioned, there's interviewer-led and candidate-led. And in terms of candidate-led, you have to lead the session and you have to kind of take charge. So it's important to know which company does what, because they might or may not let you know. After that, interviewer. So when you get an interview, they let you know who's going to be your interviewer. Like 95% of the time, they told you, for example, it's going to be Lama Kamas, partner in the, for example, sustainability practice at Kearney, for example. And so what really helps is researching just their LinkedIn, for example, and seeing if there's anything that you're interested in, if there's anything you have questions about, and kind of relating with them. On that point, it really gives you bonus points. It makes you more interesting. It makes you stand out, especially if you can ask a good question that they want to talk about. Because at the end of the day, usually the people interviewing you are specialized in this specific topic and they're passionate about it. They want to talk about it. And if you show interest in it, it kind of gives you like a good edge on everyone else. So I would say also find out more about your interviewer. Another part of consulting interviews is the first part is what they call fit questions. This is usually just the normal interview questions. So are you to know if you're a good fit for the firm, other than if you can solve the case study. So I would say they're less important than the case study, but they're still important. So for example, why would you, let's say you're interviewing for BCG. Why did you choose BCG? Or why did you choose consulting? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or these are just normal interview questions. Usually the interview is 45 minutes long. The first 15 minutes or the first 10 minutes are the fit questions. And then 30 minutes you solve a case, and then they'll leave usually 5 questions at the end for you to ask, 5 minutes at the end for you to ask questions. And it's really recommended that you do. They don't look at it in a good way if they say, do you have any questions? And you say no, and then the interview ends. They prefer that you ask them something. So yeah, and then of course you have to solve the case, and the case can be, the more you look into it, the more you practice, the more you'll know. But there are lots of different types of cases. So there are profitability cases where they just ask you, for example, the costs are too high for this company and they need you to solve, all cases have a math portion where you have to solve math. And so something important I want you to know is that the math itself is not that important. So if you solve in the correct way, but you get a wrong final answer, it's not a big deal. They will not say, no, you're not gonna get in accepted because you didn't get the number. At the end of the day, they know that realistically, when you're working on a project or you're working as a consultant, you're not using your brain, and you don't have to solve on a paper with a pencil, you know. But so they know calculators exist. They just want to know if you can get to the correct way of thinking to solve. So sometimes they just ask you like, how did you get this? You have to talk the whole time. So this is kind of how a case study goes. And then there's market sizing, there's market entry, there's merger and acquisition cases, there's some creative ones. So it really depends. And the more you practice, the more you'll know that there's different types of cases. And then lastly, like I mentioned, asking them questions at the end. I think we already went through it, so we can just move on. You try to relate to them, you find out more about the interviewer, things like that. Okay, so lastly, some key considerations for if you want to consider getting into consulting. So I would say that a common misconception is that consulting is so glamorous, you travel so much, you have so much fun, and some of that could be true, but usually I'm talking specifically for young Saudis joining consulting in Riyadh. There will not be much traveling. Why? Because most of the projects are in Riyadh, in Saudi. So people are traveling from abroad to come to, consultants are traveling to come to our project because we don't have enough Saudis in the Saudi firms. So usually as a Saudi, they won't staff you abroad because they're already moving people to here for the amount of demand, in Saudi. So it's very rare that you get staffed in a project abroad. And if you do, it could be in, I guess, close places, close countries. يعني مثلا أعرف someone who got a project في Oman, أعرف someone who got a project في Qatar. That's basically it. Sometimes Dubai, but it's rare. So the people who are doing the traveling are the people not based in Saudi. If you're not based in Saudi, then yeah, there could be a chance, especially if you're based in Dubai, that it will involve lots of traveling to Saudi. Another thing is that a typical misconception, which makes a lot of sense for people, is that the more you move up in your life career-wise, the easier it gets. So, for example, when I get to manager, I can chill out a bit. I won't have to do as much work. I can give the people under me the tasks. I'll be more in charge, leadership role. When I get to partner, same thing. In consulting, that's not the case. I would say you probably get busier, which is really rare. But it's because in consulting, it's not a typical job. You always have a boss. So no matter how high up you get, no matter how high up you get, like for example, if you reach partner, senior partner, you still have to serve the client. The client is forever your boss, and the client is forever the most important person. And so you will never be fully in charge of yourself, and you will never be fully, like, you will never have like a lot of freedom. So I would say that's a big thing to keep in mind, is that it actually gets, in my opinion, more busy the more you grow up. In my opinion, the hardest role to have in consulting is a manager role, just because of the sheer amount of things you have to consider. You have to consider the project, you have to consider the client, you have to consider the work, and you have to consider your team. And just a lot going on. So I think this is something you should keep in mind. Another thing is that a lot of people think like the data is the most important part. So in terms of, I gather the things and I put them on the slide, but actually it's how you convey your message. If you did 1 or 2 or 3 months of work and gathered all this information, but you didn't show it correctly to the clients, you didn't prove that this information is useful and you're correct and they should follow this, then you wasted your time. If they say no, all of your work and effort and research just went in the trash. So it's actually how you display your data is more important than the data itself. Even to the point where this is why a lot of people have a bad idea on consultants, is that they say, for example, they have like suspicious data, but they prove or they show that it's like actually really good data. So sometimes you can make people, I guess, agree or believe, even if the data isn't even sound, which I'm not saying I agree with, but it's sometimes more important than the actual information. And then something else we should look into is, of course, the pros of consulting. So you get, like I mentioned, very high exposure. As an intern, on my 3rd project or 2nd project, I was in the room with like really, really, really senior people that I would never get the chance to be in the room with if I wasn't in consulting. So I'm in like a boardroom in a workshop with like the CEO of the major bank of Saudi, for example. And I can talk to him and he can talk to me. And if I actually cared about banking, or if I wanted to be in the banking field, then I have a very big, clear way in that I can have a relationship and get a connection with the CEO and kind of talk to him and show him my interest and maybe get a job offer, or maybe get, a big basically leg up on someone else who is a fresh graduate and also wants to join bank. So I would say this is a very big pro, and it's rare for people our age to be in rooms with really important people in the government and in the private sector. Another thing is, of course, the great benefits and the great pay. So consulting, because of the demand of the lifestyle and the work-life balance, they have to make up for it in other ways. And so they let you live like a luxurious, you can say luxurious lifestyle with like a very high salary compared to people your age with your experience. And of course, there's also fun things like they pay for your Uber, they pay for your food when you're on a project. So you really have like almost no expenses. Sometimes if you're in another place, let's say you get a project, which I said is rare, but let's say you get a project in Dubai, they'll pay for you every single week to go back to Saudi. And what else? Usually you have like team dinners and like fancy, expensive restaurants and things like that. Sorry. So this is also something that I think gets a lot of people in the door for consulting. Another thing is, like I said, the amount of learning, you really gain a lot of skills. You, I think, gain skills that in other places would take you much longer. So I think that's a really good thing. And then, like I said, pathway to leadership roles. So I know people who left consulting with only 2-3 years of experience, and they immediately went to like a director or a manager or assistant manager role. Very common. So you can get an assistant manager role after just 3 years of working, which usually would take like 5-6 years in the public sector. So this is a pro. In terms of cons, the biggest one, of course, work-life balance. It's very brutal working in consulting, and I'll just be completely honest about it. The hours are extremely long, and you can't really do anything about it. So this is like the price you have to pay, and you have to be aware from the beginning. If it's not really acceptable to be like, okay, I'm only going to work 8 hours. This is not the career for you, you know? So I would say the average is at least 12 hours a day and sometimes more. And that's like a not bad project, genuinely. Like if you work 9 to 9, that's considered good. So that's firstly. I've worked on projects where it was like 16 hours a day, and it gets brutal. So that's the first thing, is you have to learn to adapt. And so I, for example, will never make a plan or commit to anything in the middle of the week. There's just no way. Sometimes you work weekends. It depends. So basically, you have to put all of the things you have to do, the chores, the errands, the fun, the family time, everything has to be on the weekend. And it's pretty hard. So that's the first con. And then second is all the uncertainty and change. If that's something that you don't like or you have a hard time with, there's a lot of it in consulting, and it's hard to get used to. So that's the first thing. Sorry, that's the second thing. Thirdly, there's a lot of pressure. And I would say this is both good and bad. So why does the pressure come? Is because you have more responsibility. So something that I've always wanted to do is I want to present to clients. I want to own my tasks. I don't want for people to give me things that I only do a small part of, and then I don't know what happens to it, and I don't know if it passes, if it doesn't pass. I never get credit. And so when you get these things, it's a lot of pressure. And so usually, in my opinion, when there's pressure, it's you're gaining something, you're learning, you're growing. You don't honestly get to learn when you're comfortable and you're in your comfort zone. So this can be a pro and a con. And then cons is if you, for example, don't want to travel, in my opinion, it's not as glamorous as you think. So the consultants based in Dubai, every week going back and forth is brutal. Every week for months, sometimes for them for years. And some of them have families and stuff like that. So this is much later on. And for now, it's not that relevant to us, like I said, because we're based in Riyadh and the business is here. But if that were to ever change in the future and all the projects were to go, for example, let's say to Dubai, or they were to go to another country from Saudi, which is very long term, but there is a chance that you will have to be the one who goes weekly back and forth, which gets tiring. And then things I would say, mistakes to avoid. I would say this is just my opinion, but if you have a clear passion or a career path in your mind, so let's say that you want to be like a computer scientist and you want to work in coding and computers, I would say don't join consulting. Why? Because consulting, and not just consulting, when you're a fresh graduate and the first job you take is all you know, you're going to make all of your connections in that job. You're going to learn everything about that job. You're going to get, I wouldn't say comfortable, but it's all you know. And then it's harder to make a career shift. So if I've been a consultant for a year or two, and then I suddenly want to go to computer science, it's hard to enter computer science. Why? Because I don't have experience in it. So why would they hire me? You know, why? I don't have the hard skills. I don't have the technical skills. I don't know anyone in that field. And I don't know what firms are out there. I've never worked in them. And so it's harder to make the jump. So if you already have something you know you want to do, I would say it's kind of a waste of time, in my opinion, to be a consultant, because when you make the switch, it's hard. And that's true for anyone. If I'm in healthcare, أنا دكتورة تخرجت بشهادة طب وصرت دكتورة، اشتغلت دكتورة، فجأة صرت بروح أشتغل في مكتب in an office. It's going to be a big switch, and it's going to be hard because I don't know anyone there, and why would they hire me? I don't have experience. So I would say if you have something that you know you want to do, I would say just stick to it and leave the consulting for, like, I guess the people who don't know what they want. صراحة, that's my opinion. After that, I would say if you are a person who likes to be creative and you like to be, you're into art and things like that, I would say consulting is not really for you, because there's not a lot of room for creativity. It's the opposite. It's actually that the company is offering the service to this client, and they want us all to be on the same page, and they want our output and our work to all reflect on the company. So we all have to work in the same way. We have to follow the same framework, follow the same structure, create the same slides that look like that they were all created by one person. And so that doesn't leave much room for creativity. So in my opinion, I would say if you see yourself as a art person or a creative person, it's not really the place for you. And then after that, I'm done. Or opening the floor to questions. I would prefer, just because I'm sharing the screen, I can't really see the chat. So it would be better if you open the mic and then ask.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
عندي سؤال في الكتب. هل في كتاب يعني فادك أكثر من بقية الكتب؟ أنا صراحة عشان أكون صادق عندي يمكن 3-4 كتب وما أدري بأي واحدة أبدأ فيها. وش اللي أفضل مثلا إنها يعني تعطيني البيسك نوليدج في الكيس فورماتينج والأشياء هذه.
اوكي واضح. أنا برأيي a good book for beginners is Darden. ما أدري لو عندك جامعة اسمها داردن، عندهم كتب هم ينزلوا كل سنة كتاب جديد في كيسز جديدة. هم عندهم بداية من أعتقد 2018 على 2025 شيء زي كذا. هذا أنا أعتقد إنه في ميكس كويس بين الكيسز السهلة، الكيسز الميديوم، الكيسز الصعبة. فأنا أقول إن هذا الكتاب اللي أنا بدأت فيه وركزت عليه. بس كل ما أنت تتدرب والناس يعطوك كيسز من كتب ثانية، تصير تلاحظ إنه في كتب فيها كيس واحد مثلا مرة يساعد. فأنا مثلا أقول أحسن ماركت سايزنج كيس من وارتن، كتاب اسمه وارتن. بس أنا أنصح صراحة داردن، أحسه كتاب كويس كبداية. وأنا في اللينكدين حقي عندي article من I think عن consulting. بحاول أفتكر أي واحد منهم عشان في أكثر من واحد، بس في واحد أعتقد اللي هو What should I know about consulting أو شيء زي كذا. في لينك في كتب I think فوق 30 كتاب أو شيء زي كذا. بس لو ما عندك الداردن بوكس والورتن بوكس كل اللي أنا قلتها كلها موجودة هناك.
يعطيك العافية.
الله يعافيك.
طيب since nobody's questioning عندي سؤال ثاني.
تفضل.
وش فرص الناس خارج البزنس فيلد انهم يدخلون الكونسلتنج؟ I know that مثلا انه البزنس اناليسيس مثلا بشكل عام it's not يعني مركز على التخصص بشكل عام. anyone can do it no matter what they are. فوش يعني على سبيل المثال أنا من مجال صحي، أنا لسه انترن حاليا. الانترنشيب عندنا مانداتوري مدة سنة.
مهم.
لكني أفكر بالكونسلتنج من السنة الماضية وجالس
ايوه.
أجهزها يعني.
مم.
الصراحة ما أشوف ناس كثيرين، يعني ممكن بس أعرف اثنين من الهيلث كير راحوا للكونسلتنج. ف
مم.
يعني معرفة محدودة في إنه كيف التشينج.
ايوه. هو صراحة يعني شوي صعب الموضوع، لأنه زي ما قلت لو أنت داخل بس لك مثلا كم سنة في المجال الصحي، يصير أنت حتدخل كجونيور في كونسلتنج، وكجونيور أنت ما تقدر تختار لو أنت تبي تكون تدخل في مشاريع صحية. فلو أنت سؤالك إنه لو صعب أو سهل أدخل، مرة سهل بالنسبة إنه لو بس تتدرب على الكيس ستدي زي ما قلت، أي أحد يقدر يدخل. وأنا شفت ترى ناس مو كثير زي ما قلت، مو كثير، بس يروح من المجال الصحي للمجال الكونسلتنج و it happens. ف it can absolutely happen if you want to make the shift. بس لو لما يصير هو معقد شوي، لو أنت تبي تكون في cases أو في projects healthcare وأنت داخل كجونيور، هذا اللي صعبة، إنه مو شرط يحطوك في cases في البروجكت حقت الهيلث كير. فبس لو انت بشكل عام تبي تدخل مشاريع، تقدر تدخل في اي مجال، يحطوك في بنك ولا يحطوك في مستشفى ولا يحطوك في وزاره، يصير عادي، مو صعبه. ما فيها شيء يعني، بالعكس. بس اللي انا اشوفه يعني لو انت تبي تكمل في المجال الصحي، انا برايي انك تكمل في المجال الصحي كثير علين ما يصير عندك experience كويس في المجال الصحي هذا. لو انت تبي تقعد في المجال، بعدين بعدها في الاخير تروح كونسلتنج لما تكون more experience، لما تكون مثلا كمانجر او فوق، عشان في ذاك الوقت اسهل انه انت تصير خاص، انت مثلا متخصص في المجال الصحي، ويحطوك بس في مشاريع في المجال الصحي، وبالعكس تكون انت big يعني big resource for them. فانا افتكر يعني في بارتنر سوالي مقابله، ما شاء الله كان دكتور، عنده MD وعنده MBA وعنده مدري ايش مليون شهادة، ما شاء الله. اشتغل كدكتور في الجيش في الهند، مدري ايش سوى، كان حاجات مرة ما شاء الله يعني extremely impressive. دحين ما شاء الله بارتنر ماسك يعني من الكبار في الهيلث كير اندستري بالذات في هذه الشركة، اعتقد كان في BCG. فهو بس يشتغل في المشاريع في المستشفيات وفي المجال الصحي في وزارة الصحة وكذا. فأنا أحس هذا اللي تميك سنس لو أنت تبي تكمل في المجال حقك. بس لو أنت لا مرة تبي تطلع من المجال الصحي، يعني تقدر تدخل كونسلتنج، بس إنه بيكون زي ما قلت يحطوك في مشاريع في مجالات مختلفة.
يعطيك العافية.
الله يعافيك.
في
طيب
أسئلة بالشات.
أيوة دحين دوبي شفتها. طيب خلينا نشوف. Is it possible to transition into management consulting as a fresh graduate? أيوة it is very possible. وفي شركات كثيرة عندهم programs حقت الفريش جراجويت، تكون بالعكس بس سعوديين، عشان هم صراحة في الكونسلتنج في السعودية عدد السعوديين قليل، فيصير إنه يحتاجوا هذه البروجرامز حقت الفريش جراجويت تكون فقط للسعوديين عشان يزيدوا عدد السعودة وكذا. it's very possible. وبعطيك أمثلة. ففي ماكنزي في أعتقد أنت مو قصدك اللي هو مين، أعتقد مو قصدك الكواب. فبعدها ماكنزي في إنك تدخل كبزنس أناليست، بس لازم تسوي انترفيوز بكل سهولة، ما يحتاج شيء. تسوي انترفيوز حقت بزنس أناليست 4 انترفيوز، ولو انقبلت خلاص تدخل تصير على طول بزنس أناليست. وفي كيرني في اللي اسمه رواد، برنامج رواد، هذا تدخل كأناليست اللي هو شوي أقل من بزنس أناليست، و تقعد تقريبا سنة you get promoted to business analyst. وإيش كمان في في BCG يسموه junior visiting associate JVA، نفس الشيء. يكون fresh graduates. ففي كثير شركات على حسب أنت فين بتروح، على حسب تبي تدخل في أي position. بس it's very possible. اللي بعده. In your own experience, what was the hardest aspect of preparing for the interviews? How did you manage it? I think that the hardest part was, I would say, getting used to the practicing. But I had, alhamdulillah, a lot of time in between when I was doing in between jobs. So I kind of just went on Case Coach, which is a website, and I gave myself a goal that I would do like 3 interviews every day. So I would do at least 2 to 3 every single day, and after that you gain confidence and you feel like you're doing well. So you feel like you understand the cases more, you have the framework, and it becomes like a reflex. You don't have to think about it much, so you can do it faster. Because usually also when you're practicing, you have 45 minutes, but if you are doing the real interview, you have maximum 30 for the case. So I would say the hardest aspect is, for me, it wasn't the fit questions, which are just the normal interview questions, because they're very easy to prepare for. You can just write down your answers, have them in the back of your mind. It was just the practicing for the cases and the kind of ambiguity of not knowing what they're going to tell you if you've ever solved it before, how to solve it. So I would say it's just the more practice, the better. And there's so many resources online that can help you with that. So all you have to do is, the problem is the commitment and the time management. You have to have time. And it's really hard when you have a full-time job. So that's why I would say, I would recommend like you start when you're in university or when you have any break between university and working during your co-op, things like that. Let's see the other one.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
الحين يعني التخصص اللي أنا بدرسه كأندرجراجويت ما له علاقة بالشغل اللي ممكن أشتغله، يعني as a fresh graduate بعدين لما أتخرج، أو البروجكتس اللي ممكن أشتغل عليهم.
صراحة لا، يعني ما حيكون له دخل. إنه مو هو شيء أكيد. أنت تقدر تقول في firms they allow you to إن تعطي البريفرنس حقك، إنه تقول مثلا أنا والله درست خلينا نقول finance، فأنا بشتغل في مشاريع finance، بس ما هو شرط أبدا. وفي ناس يدرس أشياء مرة شاطحة ما لها أبدا دخل في أي شيء، اللي دارسين مثلا ترجمة ولا دارسين مثلا English literature عن الكتب وعن ذي الأشياء ويدخلوا consulting. consulting فيه أكثر يعني variety، تنوع في التخصصات، عشان هو صراحة ما يفرق في الكيسز، بالذات كفريش graduate في البداية. It's completely unrelated. يعني they only consider, I would say, your work experience, not your educational background in terms of projects. في خزامة رافع يده، ما أدري لو سألت سؤال ولا لسه.
إيه عندي سؤال أنا. هلا لما شلونك أول شيء؟
الحمد لله.
I wanted to ask, Auntie, your bachelor's was MIS, right? So you were talking about consultancy, and you said in anyone that is like artistic or creative ما راح يصلح له consulting, right?
Yeah.
So for me, أنا تخصصي MIS, وإن شاء الله I'm going to be graduating next year. But till now, I don't really have a solid plan for the future. يعني عرفتي في عندي a lot of ideas، يعني زي project management, data analysis, system analysis والأشياء هذه. From your understanding, could I get like some input on what you think would be best for me?
أنا صراحة أحس يعني if you're passionate or interested in the things you just mentioned, then I would, if I were you, صراحة dabble in getting a bit of work experience أول في المجال هذا، في المجال related to ال MIS. ولو ما مثلا حسيتي جازلك ولا ما حسيتي it's for you، بعدين you can consider, I would say, consulting, just because you have a bit of interest in the fields related to ال MIS. وأنا صراحة I didn't، يعني that's why I went into consulting. The part about the creativity يعني هو أكيد مو مرة شرط، بس that's just from my opinion. أنا أحس إني أنا سويت internship في a content department in like the e-commerce section of a retail company قبل في الشرقية، و it's like a smaller company مرة different to consulting of course because the consulting firms are so big وinternational كذا، وكان مرة في مجال creativity. فأنا حسيت إنه مرة شيء عجبني صراحة، إنه يعني ما في set structure أنت لازم تتبعيه، لازم تمشي عليه. في مشكلة ولا في whatever، أنت سوي اللي تبيه وإحنا نشوف بعدين كويس ولا مو كويس، أنت قرري. يعني هذا it's very rare in consulting. It's like you can work together with your team, but usually they're going off of things they've done in the past. فهمتيني؟ تقريبا ما حيجي على على يعني ما حيجي في طريقكم شيء أبدا ما حد قيد شافه وانت usually تمشي على الليدرشيب اللي معاكي مو مرة انت يلا انت figure it out ولا انت سوي يعني هو يقول لك سوي كذا سوي كذا. That's usually how it goes. You can suggest and recommend things of course. غالبا يعني لو خليك تعطي opinions حقتك بالعكس يكون أحسن لك إن أنت مو بس تاخذي directions وتقعدي بالعكس إنك أنت تقترحي. بس في نفس الوقت يعني هو على حسب هو المانجر ولا whether he or she agrees with what you said as the way to move forward. So that's the reason why I say there's not a lot of room for creativity. إنه السلايدز وكده يعني of course you have some room for creativity in terms of designing. إنه مثلا بحط هذا الchart ولا بحط هذا الchart كده يعني. بس إنه in terms of the thinking itself مو مرة. فعشان كده أنا أحس إنه يعني أنا أقول للناس اللي يسألوني for personal advice كده عن consulting إنه يعني if you see yourself as a totally creative person I would say it's not the best in terms of يعني most likely ما بيكون في lots of creativity بس يمكن يجي طريقك مشاريع of course it depends where you have some room for creativity. بس I would say يعني you could also ask around يعني شوفي مثلا ناس في الروles اللي انت you mentioned نقول system analysts ولا project managers ولا whatever وأحس try to see what their day-to-day work is like to see if that's something that you could be interested in. بس أنا in my opinion أنا أحس إنه مو لازم you get into consulting straight away. You can explore a bit in my opinion عشان تعرفي لو هذا الشيء يعني لو في شيء تاني أنت تبي تسويه ولا لا. That makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you مرة. I want to ask another question بخصوص ال MIS بشكل عام يعني do you have any like certificates أو أشياء تحسين إنها تنمي وتساعد أكثر يعني things I should get؟
شوف صراحة I personally don't have any بس أنا أفتكر إنه في الMIS Club في الجامعة كانوا ما شاء الله دائما يسووا webinars ومواضيع عن هذا عن قصدي webinars suggestions عن هذه المواضيع. إنه أفتكر they used to mention like SQL certifications. They used to mention project management اللي هو CAPM CAPM عشان هذا اللي you can get it وأنتي لسه في الجامعة. بس ال PMP يكون لازم يكون عندك 3 سنين أعتقد خبرة. بس أنا أحس يفيد ال project management ف I would say maybe CAPM. وغير عن كده there's the more technical side of it for MIS. لو أنت تبي تدخلي في الحاجات الكمبيوترات يعني you can get coding certificate حاجات حقت Python و Java ودي الأشياء SQL I think I mentioned CSS وبس on the business side صراحة ما في شيء تقريبا بيجي في بالي بس في زي ما قلت resources حقت الناد MIS القديم كان فيه أفتكر يحطوا سلايدات وبوست عن الموضوع. I would say that's what you could look into صراحة.
Okay, thank you very much. شكرا مرة.
عفوا. I think a few more questions. What is the minimum number of years of experience that would be appropriate for me to be a consulting professional in my major? مو مرة استوعبت السؤال. The number of years of experience would be appropriate for me to be a consulting professional in my major. Do you mean to enter consulting, Abdurrahman, and the minimum number of years to like enter consulting after your major? Hanshuf, if he answers, I think I'll move on to another question and I'll wait for him to kind of clarify. How to land summer internships as uni students? I would say you can just reach out to consultants in different firms to get like a referral and just apply, that's it. So I know that Oliver Wyman has a lot of summer interns usually. And what else? Who else has summer internships? Trying to think. I think Kearney also has summer internships. It's just simply that you check the website and there's no other way around it in consulting firms. Like they're very active on their website. So if the role is available on the website, then it's open. If it's not, then it's not open. Like there's no way you can get an internship if they didn't announce it. So I would say just keep checking the website And then also you could reach out to HR, or you can reach out to people who have been interns in the past for advice. Because honestly, I've never done a summer internship. I've only done co-op at consulting companies. But I know people who have. So I know that they just simply applied and they asked around. For example, if there's a firm you really want, but it's not open, the position, you can just ask someone in HR on LinkedIn and just say, like, are you guys going to open summer internships, and when is it going to open, so you don't miss the date. إيش اللي يجذبهم بحيث يقبلونك مهما كان تخصصك؟ يا محمد, it's basically زي ما قلت consulting interviews itself. هذا أهم شيء عندهم, ما يهمهم at all التخصص حقك. It's all about whether or not you do well in the interview. That's all they care about, is that they're impressed, and you'll move on to the next round. So if you do well in the first one, then second one, then third one, هذا أكثر شيء يهمهم. فإنك تبين شخصيتك, تسأل أسئلة وتحل الكيس كويس, ما في شيء غير كذا في الكونسلتنج. هذا الشيء الوحيد اللي يخليهم يقبلوك. عبد الرحمن فين راح؟ What is the minimum number of years of experience that would be appropriate? عفوا جنى. أعتقد أخف شيء فاتني صراحة. Would you say that the skills needed in consulting change depending on the level you join in? If yes, how so? I would say that the skills really do differ, and usually something actually really useful is that consulting companies sometimes have like the competencies, kind of, they lay it out in like a graph, so you can see depending on your level what they expect of you. And the lower it is, the more it goes into, like, I would say, hard skills. So when you're first joining, they just care, can you make PowerPoints, can you research? And then the higher you go in the firm, I feel like the more they start caring about, like the soft skills, the taking on more responsibility. So you own the work, you can defend it, you can present it, you can answer the questions. But I think the more responsibility you have, the more it kind of, the more it involves like you becoming into more senior levels, especially, of course, like managerial levels. But in terms of analyst, business analyst, I would say not a super big difference, but there is a bit of a difference, if that makes sense. هل يحتاج سنوات خبرة معينة عشان أكون مستشار تخصصي مثلا كمهندس كهربائي؟ يعني لو أنت داخل consulting company